Uh, you're very welcome to Kicking It with Sensei. And today we're joined by Maxime Chouinard, who is an Irish stick fighting instructor. And I think it's particularly Antrim Bata he does. And if you'd like to give the audience a wee bit of background into your martial arts, Maxime, would be perfect.
Absolutely. Well, I've been practicing martial arts personally since I was, I think it was about 14 when I first started with Kyokushin karate in my hometown. Did that for about 8 years, and I branched out later on into Kenjutsu. So I've done Shinkendo, Niten Ichiryu, and now I practice Yagyu Shinkagiryu. I taught Kenjutsu for about 12 years. And I've also been very much interested in fencing, boxing, been researching quite a lot of historical martial arts. And in 2007, I traveled to Ireland with my brother-in-law, Emil. And while we're planning our trip, I had heard about this thing called Irish stick fighting, or Bata, some people sometimes call it. And I knew it was kind of a thing. There were discussion groups online about it. And whenever I traveled, before that I traveled to Japan, and I trained karate there, and I had a blast. So I thought, well, why not go to Ireland and learn Irish stick fighting? That'd be great. So anyway, I contacted some people on those boards, and somebody called Louis Pastor was living in Scotland at the time, and he told me, "Oh, here's this contact, this guy in Ireland, Mr. Ramsey. Just drop an email, and he'll probably going to be able to help you." And so I contact him, and first thing that Mr. Ramsey asked me is, "Oh, are you Quebecois?" Because I'm, for those that don't know, I'm a French Canadian. Quebecois. So we're a small part in North America of French people that immigrated there in the 17th century and upward, and we've always been very, very close to Irish people. Lots of my ancestors are Irish, actually immigrated during the Great Famine, and so I said, yes, I'm Quebecois, and he said, well, because Quebec people have been so friendly to Irish people in the past, I'll teach you guys what I know. So anyway, we traveled there, and in my mind, it was quite many years ago, I thought, oh well, Irish stick fighting there must be a couple of schools in Ireland teaching this, right? So once we got there, we figure out pretty quickly that no, it wasn't the case. Most people that we talked about had no idea what Irish stick fighting was, and some of them were really interested. Some of them were, what's that? That's bullshit. It's stick fighting. Irish stick fighting is just two people hitting each other in the head. There's no skill involved. It was. It's all crap. So anyway, we're kind of wondering, well, what are we getting ourselves into? And during the trip, we stopped by a few places. We were looking for shillelaghs because we thought, well, if we're gonna learn to fight with shillelaghs, which is what Irish stick fighting is about, we should probably have some. And we were in Dublin at first and looking around, and all we could find were these, pretty crappy tourist shillelagh pieces. We didn't want that. So we're looking for the real deal, and stopped around places. And one day we ran into a martial arts equipment store. So I thought, well, maybe they have some there. So I never know, I'll go. And the guy had no idea what I was talking about. So I'd like to buy a shillelagh. I was like, what's that? I'm like, okay, well. So anyway, we ended up touring around the country a little bit, and we found some real shillelaghs on the way, and then we stopped at Cork, where my teacher was spending the summer, was visiting family there, and he taught us the style, and so we were really amazed by what we found out. Basically, Irish stick fighting the style that we learn, like I was saying, the use of the shillelagh. The art, we don't quite know when it appeared, because stick fighting is just as old as mankind. When the first man grabbed the stick is probably when this started. But we know it was a thing at least from the 18th century onwards. That's when you start to hear about it in
faction
old
wars
historical records.
kind of era.
Yeah, faction fights, but also just there starts to be some mentions of Irish people carrying cudgels, and they were probably before that, but it's hard to say because there's so little record about it.
Yeah.
But people really start to write about it then, and they also write about how good Irish people are with stick fighting. They were really considered one of the best stick fighters in at least in all of Europe, and if not in the world. And it really starts to pick up and to be much more popular in the 19th century, especially the early 19th century. And the style itself, I'd say some of the characteristic of the style is the grip. So we grab the stick here by, sometimes people will say by the third, protects the forearm, the elbow, and you use the rest of the stick to, of course, to strike with, but also to protect yourself with. So that's that's our main engaging guard, as we would say, and that's something that you don't see in a lot of other martial arts. Usually they'll grab the stick by the end, or maybe two-handed, but rarely will they have kind of this guard to use.
That's very unique to Antrim Bata itself, isn't it?
Well, I'd say Antrim Bata is very, like, from all the research I've done, because since I learned Antrim Bata, I've been doing a lot of research into historical sources to see really how it compared to what we have around. And most sources say that when Irish people fight with a shillelagh, they have this third grip, they protect the elbow. So I think Antrim Bata is very reflective of what Irish stick fighting was in most of Ireland. I think there were other methods. There's the Doyle family style that's also out there, and they have their own engaging guard that's more two-handed. Yeah.
I'm actually Doyle myself, so.
Okay, yeah.
That's my son.
Great. So you don't know any stick fighting, I guess, from your family?
No, but I do remember growing up now, my dad always had a Blackthorn shillelagh above the fireplace, but I never knew what it was growing up. But it was only about 2 years ago I kind of started to research on it, and me being the only martial artist in the family, kind of really dug deep. I started to find a lot of family roots and Irish stick fighting, so it's been a big interest for the last while, but it's, as you said, it's quite difficult to get shillelaghs even in Ireland. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, there's a few makers now that I think with the also the rise of interest in Bata, people are more interested to get some Blackthorn sticks. There's William Keeley in shillelagh. There's Francis and Frank McCaffrey in County Kerry. There's a few people around there, and I think it's unfortunately it's probably harder to find them than it was in the past. But since I've learned this, and since I've started to make videos and publicize it, because we that's kind of the rest of the story is that once we learned the style, our teacher told us, completely out of the blue, we didn't really ask for it, but he said, well, you have my permission to teach it. And we were we're kind of taken aback. But after our experience in Ireland and realizing that this was pretty much the only tradition left right now on the island, we felt a little bit like, we're like the last Jedi or something. You know, we have to do something with this, or it's gonna die. My teacher is not interested in teaching it. He's a very discreet man, and you know, so we've been trying to make it grow, and now we have our entire thing is it's nonprofit. You know, my teacher was very clear about this. If you want to teach it, it's don't make money and don't turn it into a sport. And so we're trying to respect that. But we've got a couple of schools now, of course, in Canada, a couple in the States and France as well, and other European countries. And last year we're actually I was supposed to go back to Dublin to help open up a group there, so to do a seminar, and of course COVID, so that put a damper on everything. But we're hoping, hopefully, if things quiet down on that front, to go back next year and try again.
Yeah, excellent. Be interesting to have the Canadians come to Ireland to teach the stick fighting, but that's the traditional life. And
I know, and that's what my teacher was saying. He was saying, you know, and then like in 15 years, you'll go to Ireland, and people will ask you to teach it, because nobody's going to be doing that anymore. And it's not been quite 15 years yet, but it's approaching. And yeah, I hope that we'll be able to make it grow and make it a thing again in Ireland, because I think it's a very rich tradition, and it would be really interesting to have this going around again. And you know, also one thing I've been really adamant about is to try and really promote this as a martial art, you know, and not just it's not just fighting. It's not like faction fighting, or it's not we're past that. You know, this is a martial art. This is to develop yourself as a person, both physically, mentally, and discover a little bit of your heritage while doing so. And I think it's a great art.
And the shillelagh is very different to other stick fighting from around the world. For instance, Cali was very smooth sticks, but the shillelagh was always kind of quite rough, and thorns and
it's like one thing I always explain to people is that I don't necessarily like to call it the stick, because it doesn't quite give the right image. I think it's a cudgel. It's it's like a mace more than anything else. If I was to cut the merlon to the knob from the stick here, then I would have a regular stick. But because they have this is really the business end, and it makes it a fearsome weapon. People would put lead into these things sometimes to make it even more efficient, but you can do some pretty severe damage with this, much more than just a regular like dowel like stick. And as you say, all the thorns on it, usually people would remove the thorns on a stick. And I found myself that, like, I have a few here with so those. This is one. This one is more like a fancy little gentleman walking stick, but it still has all its thorns. It's definitely fearsome. You know, if you're carrying this around town, people will probably think twice about bothering you. You know, and if you just wave this around, people will, but it doesn't make it a very practical stick to fight, because basically you're stuck grabbing it here. I can't quite grab the shaft like I would want to without hurting my hand doing so. And it might be helpful when you're blocking, but what I found is that sometimes if you're fighting with those, the thorns will break, and sometimes they'll chip away at the stick itself, because they're so hard. So you look at all the historical mentions of it, and there's never any thorns on it. And there's even a nice little image of an Irishman making his own shillelagh, and he's just cutting away the thorns on the stick. So it allows you to grab it, but the knuckles that are left help in grabbing the stick, so it doesn't slide out of your hand too easily. And they would make it out of blackthorn, obviously, and then blackthorn is it's a really tough wood, very, very good wood for stick fighting.
Excellent. There's a lot of superstition around the woods used too, isn't there, between Blackthorn and Hawthorn?
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing I wrote about recently. So if people are curious, I have a website, irishstick.com, for Antrim Bata, and I have this little blog going where I post different things about the history and the art. And yeah, I for a long time I was wondering why you'd never see hawthorn mentioned, because hawthorn is a pretty common type of hedge bush growing around Ireland, and even here in Ottawa, there's a lot of it. And people were asking, "Oh, can I use hawthorn?" And I was like, "Sure," but like I've never seen it mentioned. They talk about blackthorn, they talk about oak, ash, hazel, holly, even crabapple, but never any mention of hawthorn. And then I started digging a little bit about this, and you find that there's all these beliefs about, well, blackthorn is and the hawthorn are both associated with fairies and the underworld, but blackthorn is it's more like war and in the winter, and it's a wood that'll protect you if you carry it, as long as you cut it in the right time of the year. Where hawthorn, it's like you don't cut hawthorn, you don't want to carry hawthorn, especially you don't want to bring it into your house. And there's all these stories about people bringing hawthorn pieces in their house and family members getting sick. So yeah, I think it was very, even if people didn't quite believe in those things anymore, it was still it's still a thing. You don't use hawthorn. We're not sure why, but you don't do that. So yeah. Which is too bad, because like I was saying, here in Ottawa we have plenty of hawthorn. Farmers around here, they just complain about hawthorn all the time and say, that's growing in my field, it's come and cut it down if you want to bring it home. But there's very, very little blackthorn. At least I've never seen any growing around here, fortunately.
Here in Ireland, hawthorn is everywhere, but it just seems to be a superstition about it. And I've never seen a hawthorn shillelagh really, but it's
there's some people making them now, and I think as long as you don't believe in all the stories about it, it's fine. And I personally would I try to be without necessarily being superstitious. I try to kind of keep these things going, because I think they're part of the culture that goes around martial arts. Every martial art has their own culture and taboos, and like you don't do this, you don't do that, and I think it's important to at least keep the knowledge of it and let people decide by themselves. But I think it's an interesting tidbit.
Excellent. And do you know of any unarmed fighting systems from Ireland, or was there any, or was it just primarily like fighting?
There's definitely unarmed systems. In Antrim, but we have a few unarmed techniques. Not that much. We have what we call slaps, which are like back-ended blows with the fists. You have gouges in the eyes. You have kicks. So we have kicks where our kicks are very much like savate in some ways, because you use your shoe to strike, not necessarily the sole of your foot. So the kicks look quite similar, and there's a few wrestling techniques as well with the stick, but it's pretty limited. And I think the reason why is that there were at the time other martial arts. There was boxing, which was mostly bare knuckle boxing. People were practicing that quite a lot. Fairly different from what boxing is today. It looked, I would say, for people to get an image of it, looked more like Wing Chun than it would look like modern Queensberry rules boxing.
Yeah.
You know, there's books that were written about it, but as far as I know, boxing kept on being taught in Ireland, and it just evolved into modern boxing. And there was also collar and elbow wrestling, which was pretty big in Ireland and in North America as well. And it's going through a revival right now. This one, as far as I know, has also disappeared. But there's Rudin McFadden was working on reestablishing this style of wrestling from some written rules that people found, and also from techniques borrowed from judo and different types of wrestling. It was we don't quite know what it looked like before the 19th century, but from what we read, basically collar and elbow was the main rule was you have to grip your opponent by the collar and by the elbow, and if you break the grip, then you lose a fall. And depending on how many falls there are in the bout you're fighting, but the goal of the style is to drop the other guy on the floor first, and that constitutes a fall. And to do that, you use a lot, of course, your hands, but mostly your feet. And they would, in the early days, they would use shoes, and they would kick each other a little bit like purring. And we think that the techniques we have in Antrim Bata are actually probably related to this, because all our kicks are mostly at the legs and below the belt, and they would do that, try to destabilize the other opponent. And at some point they said, well, it's going to be hard to sell this to people, because when you finish a collar and elbow fight, your shin looks like rare steaks. So maybe we should ban the shoes from this. So they decided to just go barefoot. And but fortunately it disappeared like in the 1920s. I think the last school in Ireland closed down. And but yeah, now it's growing back again. I hope that it becomes something.
Do you think there's a kind of a renaissance going on now between, I suppose, not just Irish martial arts, but across Europe and elsewhere, of historical arts coming back?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's with the movement of historical European martial arts, it's becoming more and more recognized. I started doing historical martial arts in around 2002, and back then it was very much underground. You had a few sources online you could find, and but most people would have no idea what it's about. And now it's, you talk about this to people, even sometimes people doing MMA, and they say, oh yeah, HEMA, yeah, they recognize the term, and it's getting more and more respect. At first it was, these guys are all nerds, or they're reading their books, and they'll never learn how to fight for real. And now you have people that, like, this big community came together to reestablish these arts, and I think they're making a name for themselves, definitely. And it's I think Irish Stick is a little bit maybe surfing on that vibe right now, but we hope to be able to be recognized as our own thing, especially since it's a living lineage. It's not something that we reconstructed, but it's something that we're keeping, keeping the lineage going.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think technology is playing a big part in bringing all these back and actually having massive online presence and things? Do you think that's a big benefit for it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think now it's much more easy. It's much easier to get participative communities going online. And it's not just me and a couple of buddies and in our martial arts group fooling around. It's we have people online. You can share videos on YouTube and say, hey, listen, can you let me know how my technique looks like? And then people can comment and give you some advice, and people look at that manuals and they say, oh well, it's I think this means that, and there's debates, and but I think it's also a probably a double-edged sword in a way, because the internet increases awareness about these things, but it increases awareness about everything. So in a way, your message gets out, but it gets out in a sea of information. And the challenge is always, how do you get out of this? Like how do you tell people, hey, look here, I exist, you know?
That's it.
Like I don't know in your case, but for me, I find it's becoming a little bit harder sometimes to publicize martial arts classes, because you do it on Facebook, and then a lot of people will say, yeah, I'll come, you know, or tap maybe, and then they don't show up because they forgot, or they got tons of other invites, and you know, people are getting bombarded with so much information, so much invitation publicities, that it's the challenge is getting recognized in that sea of information.
I've actually got a lot of HEMA guys onto the channel too here and doing interviews, and I've noticed recently that there's a lot of people coming to me questioning me about HEMA and about the different styles and everything, and it's unusual. I don't actually know about the Irish stick fighting side of things, and for being my own culture.
Yeah, it's a shame, and it's but I think it's been like this for quite a long time. Like if you look at historical sources again, all the sources we have about Irish stick fighting come outside of Ireland, from the Irish diaspora. There's articles written about it in San Francisco and Chicago, even in England, and nothing comes out of Ireland. And I think, well, partly it's because the Irish immigration was so large, and there was this people that got just separated everywhere. And there's still people today that are contacting me with saying, like, oh, my grandfather did this, and I learned a few things. There's been one guy in Japan that actually contacted me saying, I learned Irish stick from this guy in Japan. Like he just immigrated there. I haven't seen what it looks like, so I can't really comment on what it is. But another guy in South Africa has been telling me recently that he learned it from his family, and his I think it was his great grandfather immigrated to South Africa and started doing stick fighting with the local Zulu tribes. And so he adapted the system a little bit to fight these guys, but he says it still looks very much like what you're showing on your videos. Or this one day I had this lady, Mariana O'Gallagher, passed away, I think about 10 years ago or so. And it was one of the first time I was teaching the art publicly. And she was this big Irish historian in Quebec for the Irish diaspora. And she came to me and she said, you know what, my dad used to do that. And he didn't teach us his art because we were all girls. It sounds incredibly silly, but she said he did show us how to hold the stick, and she had never seen anything what I did, and she just grabbed my stick, and she grabbed it exactly like we do in the style, and she started doing what we call milling. He said, oh yeah, and he showed us how to move the stick so the opponent wouldn't know where the blow was going to come from, and it was kind of an illumination for me that day. It was like, wow, this like 80-something-year-old lady comes in and she just grabs a stick exactly like I've been taught and starts doing the same thing. And you'd think that those traditions and that knowledge gets lost over time, but no, it was still there. And I think where we are in this generation, probably like the last generation where there's still people alive today that knew how to do this.
Yeah.
It's exactly the right moment to start to publicize and revitalize the art, because if we don't do it now, it it's probably going to disappear forever. Like there, we'll have to reconstruct it from the sources, like we do in HEMA.
Yeah. And where would you like to see Antrim Bata in 10 years down the line?
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
No, I'm kidding. But I would love, like, if in 10 years there were at least like one school in most major cities in Ireland.
Yeah.
I think that would be great. Maybe it's wishful thinking at this point, but I would really like for it to become something again in Ireland, and to be seen as a positive thing, because I've had different reactions from people when I say I teach Irish stick, and some people are very enthusiastic, and some people say, "Oh, that's great. This should be taught like in schools," and some people are very hostile about it. And I met Irish people who, when I was telling them that I taught Irish stick, they would cross their arms and look at me like, and because they think I'm trying to sell like an Irish stereotype, the Irish brawler and like faction fights and all. They think like, oh, this is all negative. We don't want any of this anymore. But it's all a matter of how you teach it and how you approach it. I always tell this story to people. In Japan, when the samurai class came down, people wanted nothing to do with Japanese martial arts. They were saying, this is barbaric. This was a thing of the samurai. We don't want anything to do with these guys. They were bullies. They were tyrants, and we want to learn the European stuff, fencing and all that. That's fine, but like kenjutsu, jujutsu, no. And it took a few people like Kano and even some immigrants from Europe to tell people, like, here, like, we have this rich tradition, and it doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to be about killing people. It can be about positive things. And I always feel a bit uneasy because I have Irish ancestry, but I'm not Irish, and I don't want to tell Irish people how to deal with their own culture. And I think that's important that you guys choose for yourself what you want to do with this. But I think personally that it's possible to revive this in a positive way, and to look at, it's not just two guys hitting each other in the head. There is science, there is an art to this. It's very, even though it's a working class art, it's very it's just as rich as fencing was, or just as rich, as just complex as other martial arts that were practiced by nobility and other classes. So I think it's worth preserving.
Definitely. And finally, how can people get in contact with you online and find out more about Irish stick fighting?
Well, we have different channels. We have, of course, our website, irishstick.com. People can look at it, and there's contacts. We have a list of all the different clubs right now that are practicing around the world. So if somebody's wondering, where can I practice this? Is there a club in my city? You have a list there. You have contacts. If also people want to know more, we have Facebook groups. We have one Facebook discussion group called Antrim, Bata, Irish Stick Fighting. You can join, and you can learn more about us there. And our different clubs also have Facebook groups. If you're interested in my own club, it's Ottawa Irish Martial Arts. You can find us on Facebook, and otherwise you can contact me by email, and that's all on the website. And if people are interested, we're always looking for people to open up study groups. Right now, what I tell people is, right now it's a bit difficult with COVID, but if you can meet an instructor and practice a little bit with them, the process is usually that we ask people to get a good grasp of the basic if they want to create a study group, and then ideally to do a seminar with an instructor. And we don't have a lot of instructors right now, so it's usually me or 2 or 3 other people. And if you can manage to get the good seminar going and with some people interested, and then we can look into opening up a study group and then maybe getting you certified as an instructor, and we have this this curriculum that we've established for instructors to recognize their skills. And yeah, that's how we're trying to do this. So yeah, if anybody is interested in opening up a study group, just contact us and we can work out some details. And if anybody's listening to us from Ireland, like I was saying, we're hoping to be there this year. That didn't work out, but we're hoping to probably go back next year. And if people want to meet in Dublin, then we can discuss having other clubs around the country.
Excellent. Well, we're plenty listening from Ireland anyway. So clubs I'm involved with myself I'd say over 50 instructors here. So
great.
It'll be well spread out now, hopefully.
Yeah.
I'll put all the links in the description anyway, and it was a pleasure to have you on, Maxime.
Great. Well, thanks for having me.
Perfect, and all the best.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Now.
All right. Take care.